Wait for it. David Zhang. Now I know most people watching this video would have expected me to say, hey, Winston Frederick Sterzel. But no, today it's all about you, David Zhang. Congratulations. Like many people in the comment section of your video titled, I've been lying about China, here's the truth. YouTube finally recommended one of your videos to me. Lucky you, David Zhang. We're going to talk about your video. I've been lying about China, here's the truth. Although you'll be happy to know, David Zhang, I still managed to squeeze in a few Winston Frederick Sterzels along the way through this video. And don't worry, David Zhang, it won't be out of context. That's because you and Winston Frederick Sterzel are practically joined at the hip. You know, so much so, David Zhang, that Winston Frederick Sterzel happens to show up in your thumbnail for this video that we're talking about today, David Zhang. I also watched another one of your videos while I was on your channel, David Zhang, titled, This is the End of China Insider. It mimics the recent trend of anti-China YouTubers posting, This is the End videos.
Hello.
Ni hao. It's kind of pathetic, but all of them, they're all whining that China is somehow manipulating YouTube, David Zhang.
Is this thing on? I need you guys' help.
Complaining that China is affecting your views on YouTube. It got nothing to do with the quality of your content, right, David Zhang? Am I right? While the video did do better than your other recent ones, David Zhang, let's be honest, it's just clickbait. You talked about Winston Frederick Sterzel.
LaY86, SerpentZA, China Uncensored. People like China Uncensored, LaY86, or SerpentZA. Is that channels like LaY86 and SerpentZA.
In the I've Been Lying About China video that we're discussing today, David Zhang, ni hao.
我妹妹想跟你拍照，合照可以吗？
Okay, don't you... Okay, I'm not sure where I left off. Some people asked me to take a picture. You also mentioned Winston Frederick Sterzel in the clownish This is the End video.
For example, now SerpentZA and LaY86, similar to the phenomenon that's being reported by LaY, by SerpentZA, and of course from SerpentZA and LaY86, the same reality faced by people at China Uncensored or at the China Show.
I mean, I don't normally watch your videos, David Zhang. I do see them from time to time in my recommended, but I really don't watch them. I think maybe something about the hairdo. But so, for all I know, you might talk about Winston Frederick Sterzel in every single one of your videos. I mean, would that surprise me, David Zhang? Not really. Birds of a feather flock together, David Zhang. By the way, David Zhang, in the video that we're discussing today, the I've Been Lying About China video, David Zhang, excuse me, you asked if your little skit that you did at the beginning was cringe. Obviously, David Zhang, I mean, that's subjective, right? To each their own. I see your followers in your comment section just fawning over it, David Zhang. I mean, though, to be fair, there are a lot of comments that said it was both cringe and funny at the same time. But let's be real, David Zhang. We both know that it was just cringe. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have asked. I mean, come on, David Zhang, a Chinese person, yourself, imitating Chinese people, speaking English in a way meant to denigrate them.
Typically, I need to point out to individuals, LaY86, SerpentZA, China Uncensored, and definitely China Insider with David Zhang, all paid by US government. Don't listen to these guys. They're racist, xenophobic, paid by the CIA or the NED.
Definitely cringe, David Zhang, and improper. Oh, and sorry if I don't use your middle name like I do for Winston Frederick Sterzel, David Zhang, but there's just too many David Zhangs in Falun Gong. It's curious though, in your This is the End video, David Zhang, you talked about not being funded by USAID. But you didn't even mention Epoch Times. Is it Epoch or Epoch? You didn't mention Epoch Times, which is a media arm of Falun Gong. Almost like you avoided mentioning Epoch Times, David Zhang.
But first, let's address this whole thing about
me being funded, whether that's the 1.6 billion foreign funding program or the US aid program or the CIA.
But I digress, David Zhang. Let's get back to the video at hand. I've been lying about China. I'll give you a pass on the lying part, at least for this video, David Zhang. I don't know about your others, but you know, let's be honest. It's hard to be part of the anti-China movement without telling a few lies, David Zhang. In this particular video, I can't think of any outright lies, David Zhang. You're more crafty and harder to debunk than Winston Frederick Sterzel, who just blatantly tells lies. Some of your statements come close, though, David Zhang, to a lie, but they're not outright lies. One statement that comes very close, David Zhang, is when you said young kids' hair turns gray because of competition in school. Well, there's anecdotal evidence that stress can cause gray hair, David Zhang. There's no definitive proof about that. The main cause of premature graying is hereditary, David Zhang. I'm pretty sure that you know that nearly all school kids in China of school age have thick black hair, David Zhang. You know that. So, I mean, if you know that, that's about as close to an outright lie as you can get, David Zhang, right? If you know that kids have thick black hair. I mean, the way that you present it in your video is disingenuous, misleading, and unethical, David Zhang. As if the majority of school-age children have gray hair caused by competition in school, David Zhang. And let's be clear, David Zhang, you used these tactics throughout the entire video. Let's look at three clips, the three clips that you stole from Douyin that are from automotive-related channels and that you used in your video, David Zhang. In an apparent attempt to portray Chinese-made vehicles, BYD in particular, as low quality, David Zhang.
再比如，现在有的车啊，开得好好的，那个挡风玻璃掉了，或者说这个后面的那个玻璃掉了。
隔音棉，你看看，一招就碎。
大家千万不要买比亚迪，比亚迪是中国新能源最垃圾的品牌，没有之一。本人是比亚。
I spoke to the original creators of all three clips, David Zhang, and guess what? They're furious that you took their videos not only out of context, but to smear China of all things, David Zhang. I asked each of them to provide a video statement responding to your unethical use of their content, David Zhang, for use in this video. While they initially agreed, David Zhang, that's just not how true Chinese people roll. They'd rather leave it to karma to take care of you, David Zhang. You probably already know which Douyin accounts you stole that content from, David Zhang. I mean, unless Epoch or Epoch Times prepares all your content for you, David Zhang, in that case you might not know. But just in case you did know and forgot, David Zhang, it's these three channels that I'm going to show you right here, David Zhang. Okay, here's an idea I'm going to throw your way, David Zhang. To reduce the karma headed your way, you could leave an apology in the comment section of this video. Just apologize for taking their work out of context and using it unethically, David Zhang. I mean, but let's be real. If you post an apology to their Douyin accounts, the chance that they're going to see that is about as likely as Winston Frederick Sterzel reading all the comments on his videos. It's not going to happen. So leave an apology in the comment section below, David Zhang, and I'll make sure it gets to them via WeChat. I mean, I'm doing this for you. I don't really care if you don't do it. But if you do it, I'll make sure they get it, and I'll make sure that they read your apology. I have their WeChats. I see by your recent post on your community page, David Zhang, that karma might already be creeping in. Kind of a coincidence, isn't that? Being accused of being a CCP agent is dangerous for someone like you, David Zhang. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is who believes it. Ironically, the hate that you're directing at China could turn on you as a Chinese person living in USA, David Zhang. That's just one example of karma, David Zhang, that might be creeping in. I have to wonder, David Zhang, what's the end goal of damaging China's reputation, a country that's part of your heritage, your personal heritage, David Zhang? Is your goal to take down the Chinese government, David Zhang? Possibly through like a hot war with the United States? Or maybe you just want to add to the hatred of China, David Zhang. Is that what you're trying to do? But that just fuels the US government's push for conflict if you build up the hate, David Zhang. Makes it easier for them to start a war, right? You're sowing the seeds to make the scenario more likely, David Zhang. This shows how disconnected your actions are from their real-world consequences, David Zhang. If a hot war were to break out, David Zhang, living in the USA as a Chinese person, I can guarantee you'll live in fear. Just like I would here in China as an expat, David Zhang. We'd both be seen as enemies by the average person on the street that doesn't know us. In countries where we live, David Zhang, we'd be seen as enemies. As they come to lynch you, David Zhang, are you going to explain how you made all these anti-China videos? You think that's going to save you, David Zhang? In a hot war between US and China, David Zhang, the body bags would pile up quickly, and hostility towards anything Chinese in the US would boil over. That means you. Okay, sorry, I've veered way off the topic of your I've been lying video, David Zhang. So let's get back to it with another example of your misleading and unethical framing, David Zhang, which at least in this I've been lying video seems to be your modus operandi, David Zhang. I don't know if you do that all the time, but you know, definitely in this video.
Now, let's also ignore the fact that people, unlike on social media in China, still struggle to find food.
Your use of this clip, David Zhang, to suggest people across China struggle to find food is laughable. The full story behind this clip has a lot more nuance, David Zhang. Nuance that's available on Baidu. And unless Epoch Times once again prepared the content for you, you likely read that nuance, David Zhang. Which makes your use of that clip even more disingenuous and misleading, David Zhang. Using that clip to suggest people in China struggle to find food is like me using a clip from Kensington, Pennsylvania and saying, let's also ignore the fact that unlike social media in America, American people are on drugs, right, David Zhang, huh? Is that what it's like? Dangerous, misleading, and unethical, David Zhang. That's what you are. The most laughable part of your video, David Zhang, is when you talk about Winston Frederick Sterzel and his partner having experienced the real China. It's been nearly a decade since Winston Frederick Sterzel lived in China, David Zhang. Yet he still claims to be like some kind of China expert, even on current events. You know, I heard him talking about tourism recently. How would he know? All of Winston Frederick Sterzel's current information comes from Chinese social media. Winston Frederick Sterzel actually sits in front of a green screen in a big leather chair and pretends to be in China. And you, David Zhang, claiming that your experience in China, David Zhang, until you were 11 years old makes you a China insider?
It was like that when I was 3 years old, hearing about stories of people in China. I was born in China. I lived there till I was 11.
That's like me going to primary school, learning to count to 100, and then claiming to be a world-renowned mathematician, specializing in algebraic geometry. Very similar. You're just a pawn, David Zhang, being used by Epoch Times to push an agenda. The fact that you lend a Chinese face to that agenda is reprehensible, David Zhang. Are you doing it for some moral imperative, David Zhang? No, don't tell me that. Just like Winston Frederick Sterzel, you're doing it for the money, David Zhang. Anyway, otherwise, deceptive, misleading, and unethical practices, they wouldn't be necessary, would they, David Zhang, if it's a moral imperative? That's the opposite of moral imperative, David Zhang. I dare you to tell your followers, David Zhang, that you're part of Epoch Times, the media outlet of Falun Gong. Say that, David Zhang. That would be ethical if you told them. But that's not how Falun Gong works, is it, David Zhang? They need to use deception, mislead people, and use unethical practices. So that's Falun Gong. Falun Gong has become somewhat accepted in the West, you know, especially like the US. They got several channels, a lot of media outlets. The only reason that it's become accepted is because they're anti-China, David Zhang. Can you imagine if the US and China start to work together, they start to really work together and make a better world, David Zhang? What do you think would happen to Falun Gong? Let's take one last look at this park before I shut this down. And thanks for watching.